All righty.
All right, hello, and welcome to the Human Factor, the LinkedIn Live of Inc. and Fast Company. I'm Eric Schurenberg, the CEO of Inc. and Fast Company. The publishing industry has occasionally been a springboard for entrepreneurs launching other businesses, in part because the industry shrunk so much over the past decade, and because of that, it spun off so many driven and visionary people. Now, of that breed, Michael Loeb has to be both one of the most driven and the most visionary. After being fired from Time Inc., a distinction that Michael shares with me, Time Inc. at the time was the world's largest magazine company, Michael launched Synapse, an early circulation and audience building company, which he then sold back to Time Inc. years and more than $500 million in valuation later, which must have been a very sweet homecoming. Now, having gotten the entrepreneurship bug, Michael and his partner, Rich Vogel, are now deeply embedded in the New York startup scene with a novel take on venture capital, a kind of accelerator for early stage companies that combines Vogel's operational skill with Michael's eye for the next big thing. It's called Loeb.nyc, and founder Michael Loeb is here to talk about people, about creativity, about entrepreneurship, and the score of next big things he's incubating at Loeb.nyc. Michael, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Eric. And, it's nice to be invited to something called the Human Factor, because sometimes I'm a human denier. But anyway, I thank you for that.
Well, we can get into that.
We do have something in common, which is we're both fired from Time Inc. And I was able to start the company outside of Time Inc. that I was trying to start inside of Time Inc. And it is interesting that you see such invention, and it rarely happens from inside of companies, right? I mean, these are young entrepreneurs, except for yours truly, not so young entrepreneurs that, have a bold idea, an audacious idea, and the temerity to actually start it. And big companies tend not to do that very well. And, there are many, many reasons for that. I think, but part of it, I think, is the reward structure, because if you do it inside of a company, you don't get a heck of a lot. And of course, a permission-based society is really not the haven of entrepreneurs who just need to charge ahead and do a lot of shoot, ready, aim, right?
Yeah.
And, apologize after, but.
Yeah, you can't fail inside a big corporation. And I mean, where Time Inc. is now, which is basically just a smoking hole in the ground, shows that it just didn't have the agility to adapt to a world that was changing all around it.
And I don't know the peak year of Time Inc. I want to say it was like 2002, 2003, something like that. This was a company that was throwing off $1.5 billion of cash every year. I mean, free cash flow every year. And you're right, was, the paramount peak oil of publishing. And I think if you took the next three largest worldwide publishers and added together, it would be about equal to Time Inc. With such legendary titles. And as you know, my dad worked there as a journalist for almost 40 years. And so it was a fixture in my life and our household. And it saddens me to see this, so starkly changed. In fact, in 1962, when JFK was asked, what is the most important institution or influential institution in the whole world, his answer was Time Magazine, which of course is just a shadow of its former self.
Wow. Oh, boy, how times have changed. Let's talk about your dad, if you don't mind, because as a Time Inc. Rugrat myself, that's where I got my start.
Right.
I worked for the great Marshall Loeb, both at Money and at Fortune, and he was truly a lion of business journalism. I have a question for you about that, because in all the connection I made with entrepreneurs over the years at Inc. and Fast Company, I've noticed that for a lot of them, parents loomed large in what motivated them. What influence do you think your dad had on the course your life took?
Well, thank you for asking the question. The answer, of course, is a lot. For one thing, my dad thought that nothing can be gained without a tremendous amount of hard work. So I attribute my work ethic to him. He always was a man of words and a journalist. And frankly, I do write pretty well. And if you didn't write pretty well in my family, you got kicked out of the family officially. But I was always more smitten with how to make money, right? And how businesses are built. For me at least, when you hear that entrepreneurs make money to keep score, to kind of keep a record of it, I know for myself that that is also true, that is a derivative of success. But growing up in Marshall, around Marshall Loeb, was such a rich, not financially rich, but such a rich upbringing. And he would regularly bring home his subjects, right, to our house for dinner, right? So we would get all manner of diplomats and archbishops and heads of state from different countries, and they would march out to Queens, because that's where I grew up, to a home cooked meal by my mother, Peggy. And then there was dinner conversation. And I remember one time asking the Archbishop of Ireland, what does he think about abortion? I was like 11 at the time. And I didn't really know what a third rail issue that was from Ireland. But he handled it very well. My mother she was a Catholic, was totally appalled that I came up with that. But I thought it was about the smartest question I could ask at the time.
Pretty daring. Definitely a chip off the Marshall Loeb block.
I will tell you that what would sadden my dad, and again, he passed away 3 years ago, what would sadden my dad is to see the course of journalism right now, not just some of the legendary magazines and other institutions that have been torn asunder, but the fact that we do have fake news, right? The fact that you can't turn on Fox or CNN and without getting, such an enormous difference of opinion, right? And not only that, it's so shrill and galvanized. And I grew up thinking that Walter Cronkite was the bee's knees, and at the time, both sides of the story were talked about, and there was a centrist notion in the country. But now everything is so extreme, and I think that is a derivative of the democratization of the news. And now it used to be that there were a half dozen outlets, and those were the only ones that counted and the only ones that people would trust. But of course, now there's thousands and thousands of voices, and anybody can start a blog or start whatever, and you don't get any notice unless you are very shrill and very opinionated. And I think it's sad for the country that we no longer have the notion of compromise. We no longer talk about issues. We no longer meet in the middle. It's winners and losers. And even when you see an institution like the Supreme Court talk about Democrats and Republicans, it never used to be that way. And it used to be you never got a vote in Congress that was divided along party lines to the extent that it is now. So I hope that the next chapter of this country, we're going to get back to some of those ethics. I'm not to drop names, but a friend of former Senator Joe Lieberman, who used to talk all the time that John McCain was his best friend in the Senate. Mm-hmm. And all the time they would sit down and talk it out, and they would come up with something in the middle that both parties could live with. But those times, unfortunately, are gone. I hope temporarily so, because I'd like to see him back. But anyhow, news and politics now are sharply divided, and it didn't used to be that way.
Yeah, it is a shame, and the country needs to get back to a kind of shared reality before we can get anything done. Now,
Right.
with all of the technologies that you are incubating at Loeb.nyc, I wonder if you have anything in the, I don't know, you could call it the, I've heard it called truth tech, or trying to undo the algorithms that direct people to outrageous news or fake news. Is anything like that in your portfolio? Or are you thinking about?
There isn't, but what we do have, I'd like to think, is a lot of things that are help tech, right? We have built a lot of companies that have done good for people. We started down the path of a discount pharmacy card before anybody knew what that was. That was back in 2008, and we have saved people billions and billions on their pharmaceuticals, because if they were not covered, they would essentially have coverage through our discount card and get 60% plus discounts on generics and about 20% on brands. We've largely traded out of those businesses, but that is something that helped people. Steady, I think, is a wonderful business. Steady is, and this is my shorthand for it, but it's your advocate in the gig economy. And what it attempts to do, or what its mission is to optimize incomes for those people who cobble together several gigs and call it, a full-time job. A use case would be that Uber or Lyft would have you sit in a car from morning, noon, and night. The only problem with that is that utilization rate in off hours is low. Too many cars are on the road, and what Steady would redirect you to is walking dogs instead, right? Because you're going to make more money doing that. They've got about 3 million members and growing incredibly quickly, and they increase incomes an average of $5,580 a year. So that is, I think, a help tech business.
Yeah.
We have others. We look, Eric. I get this question often, which is, what is your swim lane? And the answer is, we don't really have one, or at least one in the definition in which that question was asked. What we do is follow disruption, right? And our theory is that if there's any industry that is doing it the same way today as they did it 25 years ago, then it's ripe for disruption. We are taking a long look right now on insurance, because insurance is sold the same way. And by way of example, Steady, of its 3 million members, about 2 million do at least some driving, right? But there isn't a policy, an automobile policy, built for them, because you're either a professional, right? You're either, driving a cab, okay, or, you're using this personally. And that is how the insurance companies kind of work. You're either one or the other. And the fact of the matter is that the people who do drive, Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, etc., it's a hybrid, right? Sometimes it's personal, and sometimes it's professional. Professional rates are 3x of what personal rates are. On the other hand, if you are in an accident and you've got groceries in the back of the car, you are not covered. You're working for DoorDash. DoorDash doesn't cover you, and your insurance carrier, does not cover you either. So we're trying to build. That's an example of something we're leaning in on to help people. Right? There should be something. It should be by the mile. This is also a group of people who can't write a $1,700 check. We do have Steady tethers itself to bank accounts, because we want to measure your income and give you feedback about how you could have made more money, how you could have optimized that. So we need access to the bank account. And the neat thing is, you can build a product that can bill daily to customers, bill them more if they're driving an excess rate of speed, right? If they're going 65 in a 55 zone, then they can pay more. If they're going through an intersection that's a dangerous one, we can reroute them to a safer one. So it's a revolutionary product, and an example of where an industry has kind of lagged behind the changing lifestyles of people.
Okay. Well, Michael, that gives us a good idea of sort of where you look for opportunities. But one of the things that I think is really neat about Loeb.nyc is the way it functions.
Yeah.
It's not a classic passive venture capital firm.
No,
So
and we,
how is it different?
yeah. Well, we have, we're building about 20 companies right now.
Mm-hmm.
But Eric, we are ideas to execution exits. We're all those things. And what we put together is four disparate qualities. And these are the ideas, the entrepreneurs, the execution, and the capital, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I sometimes describe Loeb.nyc as a Tootsie Pop, and the chocolatey center is all the companies, and the hard candy shell, that is what we call shared services. And the idea behind shared services, it is that Swiss Army knife that provides all that is required for a company to start and scale, and if need be, and we usually do, raise outside capital, but not until those companies are, larger than typical. So it's not a 3 million on a 5 million. It would be a 30 million on a 50 million, right? So you've already scaled, or you've already planted the seeds, the model works, and this is scaling capital, which we are content to do on the outside. But we put together four things that you tend not to see. All right. These are usually in different buckets. And by integrating the entrepreneurs, the ideas, the infrastructure, and the capital all together, we are leaning in what is otherwise long odds of success. VCs will admit to 2 in 10 working. If you put a drink in them, it's more like 1 in 10, and that puts you into this bad cycle of requiring huge exits, right? So they all play for that one big one, that one unicorn in the portfolio that pays for everything. What we think we're doing, or what we're trying to do, is lean in on that high rate of failure by providing these companies with all the resource. And that ranges from, in shared services, back office accounting. That's because entrepreneurs are missing the back office accounting gene. I don't know why that is, but back office accounting, to some of the more artful stuff. We do have an in-house art department, but big data, big tech, AI, AR, and then all the forms of marketing, from enterprise level to direct to the consumer, and within direct to the consumer, a spectrum from old school, that would be like direct mail, TV, radio. We actually make our own TV ads in-house. Wow. We have our own phone center that we own in Virginia, 100-seat state-of-the-art center in Virginia. And then the new school stuff, of course, is everything digital: SEO, SEM, social, podcast, and everything in between. So we have teams of experts, departments that manage all those things. A lot of people will tell you direct mail, for example, doesn't work. We mail out tens of millions of pieces a year and do everything from the conceiving of it to the copywriting, to making sure the job gets properly printed and inserted, and the analytics afterwards. And so it's a totally turnkey experience. And for our portfolio companies, the other question I get is, how do you charge out your services, bill out your services? And the answer is, we don't, because these are companies that either we start, and about half of the 20 we start bespoke, and the other half ranges from a German of an idea that came from the outside to a fully formed but very, very small, very nascent company. We tend to be the only money on the cap table, again, for a extended period of time. We own the point being, we own a preponderance of the equity. And if that is the case, then billing out doesn't make any sense, right? Because the money just goes round and round. Right. The negative, I think, is that it just creates, sorry about that, it just creates big points of friction. I don't want any CEO going down to somebody in the art department saying, what do you mean it took you 3 hours to make a logo? How could it take 3 hours? And I'm not going to pay for that. So it's,
right.
Yeah. So okay. We avoid that.
let me go back to your own entrepreneurial experience, because I'm fascinated by that. Like me, you grew up inside the belly of a big corporation. Time Inc. was a big corporation back then. Your dad was part of that too, and you could have a journalism career like that. And yet, when you left, you started your own company. What propelled you into that? It was sort of to take the entrepreneurial leap.
Yeah, well,
go find a job at another publishing company. So.
Well, the answer is desperation, right? So,
Yeah.
like you, I was fired, but I was fired noisily, and I got some ink. And it really wasn't about me because, again, at the time I was launching Entertainment Weekly, and it was more an article about, does this mean that Entertainment Weekly is not the success that Time Inc. Cracked it up to be? And the answer was yes, it wasn't at the time. And you had to blame somebody, right? That fell on me. And, it was something of an unkind cut, not that I was fired, but, what was said about me when I was fired. And I kind of felt, Eric, at the time, I was not going to get a job unless I made my own. So it was really necessity. I was intrigued with the idea about Synapse, which was the papers reported as a $500 million sale. It turned out to be 800 because it had a pretty good earnout. But I did hatch the idea for that while I was at Time Inc. And I did try to launch it inside of Time Inc. That idea was a very simple one, really, which was simply that at the time, people would get magazines, they would run out, and then, publishers would send out a series, some bombard of renewal notices. And if you didn't take an action, then that relationship died. But we managed to take an entire industry and enable credit cards to be used for magazines. We found that we had to fish where the fish were. So it wasn't just trying to take existing subscriptions and put it onto a credit card. It was the credit card selling magazines. So we didn't go from the outside in, we went from the inside out. But that was a marketing company sitting on top of a SaaS platform that we built for our own purposes. And therein is the reason why it became valuable. We were at our peak selling 70 million subscriptions a year to, 1,000 plus different publications.
Wow. Let's talk about leadership now. So you're clearly a visionary in the industry. You've come up with the idea of Synapse, which was groundbreaking at the time. You feel a kinship for the entrepreneurs whose passion you tap at Loeb.nyc, but also you're the boss of a company that has 150 employees. And I don't know how many were at Synapse, but eventually every entrepreneur becomes the boss, and you can't just sit around and be a visionary all the time. How did you make that transition, and how would you kind of...
Sorry.
Yeah, sure. And how do you, what do you draw on to lead your teams?
Well, I think, it's very interesting about leadership. I think that leading by example is very important. I think that when it comes to working with entrepreneurs, the important thing is be their friend, right? And that is because when you are that entrepreneur and you are leading that company, many of your decisions are very profound and fateful. And you frankly don't know which one is right. So, do I go through door A, B, or C? One is riches, one is certain death. And I just don't know which one, but I gotta choose, and I don't have a lot of time to make that choice. What I try to do when it comes to those situations and those companies, be able to pat them on the head, which is a challenge for me because I'm not that tall, but pat them on the head and say, Joe, Sally, Sue, it's going to be okay. We're just going to make the call. And if we get bloodied with this one, we'll just dust ourselves off, and we won't make that mistake again, but we'll go through a different door next time. So I think that and it's not to say they're coddled. They're hardly coddled, but I find it very difficult to hold companies, particularly in the early stages, to things like KPIs, because I have found that it's like building a house, which is twice as long and costs twice as much. We're lucky if it's only that. It's usually 5 times longer and 5 times the amount. But what I try to do is hold on to what the overarching objective is. What are you trying to accomplish? What is the theory behind the company? And keep that as a North Star. And because you're going to find that there's a lot of trial and error, and there's got to be a certain amount of forgiveness related to that. I think that I'm lucky that my leadership is as easy as it is, because I do have a great partner in Rich Vogel. And we do have a yin-yang relationship that is quite successful. That with people, one, I think you've got to put together and tie into one another all of the incentives, and incentives have got to be aligned. I talked about our Tootsie Pop companies on the inside. All the management team has a piece of those companies, the hard candy shell. That shared services, we take pieces of every single company that we build, and that those pieces get distributed to the people. So everybody is connected to a sense of success. So I think a part of leadership is aligning objectives. Part of it is, I think, really working hard and showing up. I think that you got to lead by example, and there's got to be a certain amount of appreciation and forgiveness, because starting companies are hard. It's fraught with failure, and even to get to success, you've got to fail about 100 times first, right? And you don't want to punish that, because then people will stop trying.
Yeah.
So I think, I think to be connected in that way and to be aligned in that way is really very important. And I think the other important thing is we're very lucky to have great and seasoned people that are working really hard.
Well, let's talk about Rich. You mentioned that he's the yin to your yang. What's your yang and what's his yin?
Well, I'm, that starry-eyed guy who sees a shiny object and tries to jump in. And Rich will look at it and say, "You know what, Michael, that might just be illegal. Maybe we shouldn't do it." So that would be, he's my conscience in that way. And it serves both of us very well. We don't always agree. In fact, a lot of times we don't agree. And the fact that we don't agree is really, I think, part of the formula of our quote unquote success. Thank you for your generosity. But yeah, so I want to follow everything, and Rich wants to say, how much does it cost? Where's the ROI? And I want to say, don't think about that. This is going to work out. But somewhere in the middle, that middle path is really the path to being successful.
That's the right path. Well, you were talking earlier about the need for compromise. There it is. But also, one thing I hear loud and clear from your leadership style is you create a safe space for your entrepreneurs to experiment, and if they fail, that's all part of the bargain.
And the other thing is, Eric, we have a very good track record of putting entrepreneurs onto several different businesses. So something, we'll spin something up, there will be a conclusion. And then they come back to us, and we go back to them, and we start the next thing together. And a good example of that is Steady, the company that we talked about earlier. And Adam Roseman is the CEO of Steady, and he is amazing, remarkable. I sent them to China in about 2007. We had a merchant bank in China. I will tell you, operating in China is not easy. They have different rules in China. And you know, we did not. China was not successful. It wasn't quite that we withdrew with our tail between our legs, but Adam was determined not to leave China until he made me whole or close. For years, I was saying, Adam, I know the answer, right? I mean, this is not something we want to do. You don't have to chase every last dollar, but he refused to come home. And when he finally did, it was very clear that even though that venture was not a success, he dispatched himself with such great elan that he was deserving of, you know, another shot. It was, I guess what I'm saying is I look for a quality at bat, and that was a quality at bat. And we had a deep project list, and he pointed to steady and he said, that's the one I want to do. That's the one I want to do. So that's how that.
Wow, that's a great story. So loyalty as well as forgiveness of and encouragement of experimentation. Let me ask you about the people you've looked up to. We talked about your father, who
Sure.
I looked up to too as a young journalist. But leaving Marshall Loeb aside, who were the mentors? Who were the people whose business style you modeled yourself after or found inspiring?
Yeah, I would not. I find him amazingly inspiring, but not for his business style necessarily. But that was Steve Jobs, because that was the planet's most fertile mind, and what he came up with. I mean, I had a lunch with Nick Nicholas years ago. Nick, for everybody else, was the CEO of Time Warner for a time. And Nick was saying, Michael, even the greats, only one good idea, right? And I listed the greats. But then I said Steve Jobs, and he said, you got me there. Jobs transformed a half dozen industries. And he was visionary and bold. If you read his book, also written by a time inker, you know he wasn't the nicest of people. And I do think, Eric, sometimes you can't be nice, right, to get things done. I try, but sometimes I got to trot out the mean Michael, right, to get things done.
Yeah.
But what an incredible visionary. And think of the industries he transformed from, you know, telephones to, I mean, think about what's in your pocket, right? The mobile phone in your pocket, to call it a phone is so disingenuous. I mean, it's a computer. It is the world in your pocket. It's amazing. And it does everything, almost brushes your teeth, right? But it just about does everything. And I miss him dearly. I had the opportunity to meet him a few times and talk to him a little bit, but I miss him dearly because I think the world misses him dearly. That sense of innovation. Gosh, God knows what we would have had if he were still around doing what he was doing. That's not to take anything away from the management of that company right now, but oh my God, just the remarkable disruptive, concepts that he had the temerity, right, to chase down and build is such a, rare and wonderful thing. And he did it with, greater success than, anybody on the planet. So yes, I miss him for that. And what do I appreciate of that is the boldness, right? And the boldness is, I am sure that when he came up with whatever it was that he came up with at the time, there was 100 people who were saying, Steve, this is just not going to work. And his North Star was, actually, I know it will, right? It's a little bit about what Henry Ford said, that if I asked the American public what they wanted, they would say a faster horse, right? And Steve was surrounded with a bunch of people that said faster horse, and he was building the car, right?
Yes. Yeah.
What a remarkable intellect and talented person. Sorry.
Before we call it a day, Michael, I want to ask you a question about your own career and just reflect back on it. Few people achieve the kind of success you've had. Fewer still among entrepreneurs, where there's a There's a high fatality rate. Looking back on all you've accomplished, how do you answer the question, why you? Why did you succeed when so many don't?
Boy, first of all, I don't want to look backward. I want to look forward, right? I believe, Eric, there's so much more I want to do and so many other companies I want to start that I don't get reflective that way. But if I had to reflect, I would say that I'm curious as well. Why me? I don't know. I think that if I were a Buddhist and I had former lives, I must have done something really, really well because I'm paying it forward with this life. I think of myself as a smart person, and I think of myself as a hardworking person. But there's a lot of people that are smarter than me, and a lot of people that work harder than me, and didn't have my outcome. So I do think luck was involved. Marshall Loeb would say luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So I I seized upon a bunch of opportunities, met great people along the way. Synapse was built by me and Jay Walker, and that arced over into Priceline.com. And Jay was likewise a towering intellect and not the easiest person to partner with, but a towering intellect. So yeah, luck played into it, hard work played into it, ideation played into it. I do think that entrepreneurs have this thing that gravity does not apply to them, and that is one of the reasons why I have Rich Vogel, because he actually says, you know what, when you see that stop sign, you actually have got to stop, right? You can't just run. And I'm saying, wait a minute, that's such an opportunity. Everybody else is stopping. I can go faster, right? But so I think that having that unfettered mind, right, not being constrained by what is being done right now. And I do think that entrepreneurs have this thing where they look at just about everything and they say, this could be done better, right? This could be, this could be more efficient. The battery life could be longer. There's just a better way to do just about everything. And unfortunately, that plagues me because I look at, systems and things, and I just kind of say, this is suboptimal. I mean, and it just happens automatically. And if you want an example, I'll give you a weird one, but we don't have to do that.
Go ahead. Let's get a weird example.
All right. So I was getting my COVID shot, right? And I had to go to the Bronx for my COVID shot. And there was a 3-hour line, right? Even though you had an appointment, there was a 3-hour line. And I went to the guard in the front. It was heavily policed. I went to the guard in the front and I said, hey, can I just I'll come right out. I'm not getting a shot. Can I walk in and just see, the operation? And he goes, okay, fine, go in. And what I found, Eric, is there was a half dozen people checking you in, which took like 20 seconds. And there was a half dozen people giving you a shot, which might have taken 30 seconds. And the bottleneck, right, was that you got to wait 15 minutes inside before they let you go. And everything, that entire apparatus was waiting for those people because it was a small room and every seat was 6 feet apart to, have their 15 minutes. That was the bottleneck, right? Wow. So I went back to the guy running. I figured out who was running the place. And I said, listen, if you flip that, right, instead of having this long line, 3-hour line outside, right, and having, the 15 minutes inside, flip that, right? Put the 15-minuters outside. And by the way, it was a 19-degree day. So imagine being out on a 19-degree day. And if you flip that, guess what? Your throughput, right, would triple, right? Because that was the bottleneck. And he listened to me very politely. And then he said, that's a good idea. We're not doing that. But, so you can't turn it off is the message. It's with everything. I mean, I'm looking at this operation and I'm just seeing exactly where, right, I could get that 3-hour line down to 3 minutes if you just flipped it, right? But that wasn't going to happen. But
All
anyway.
right. All right. That's a great place to leave it, Michael. The unfettered mind, the entrepreneurial approach that always says there's got to be a better way to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric.
Michael Loeb.
Yeah.
And this has been The Human Factor, the LinkedIn Live of Inc. and Fast Company. Thank you for watching. And thank you, Michael Loeb.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it.